we're going to go to the casino. We're going to get the money and we'll bring it back in a duffel bag. I felt like I was in the mafia. I was a kid that moved from Boston to Vegas in late 1995. And I saw the opportunity in Vegas, and it was growing really quickly. At the time, I was dating a young gal who was a GM of radio stations in Boston. Her name was Blondie. She was on the Howie Carr show. I don't know if you know her. Howie Carr was a big talk show guy in the Northeast. And her personality on the show was Blondie. And so Blondie said, "Hey, I'm moving to Vegas. I'm going with my boyfriend." So away we went, and we stayed on the Strip, and that was quite experience, never being in a city like that. But I ended up moving here. Unfortunately, it didn't work out with Blondie, but I saw the opportunity for business in Vegas. I started hustling. I started going to car dealerships and body shops. You know, I grew up with a father who was an entrepreneur. He was the first Bosch distributor for Bosch in North America. He was the first foreign car auto parts store. So I grew up with, basically cars in my blood. I have fuel. I also grew up with a father who said, if you want to get something done, don't ever depend on anybody. Go get it done. You figure it out, and you rely on yourself. And so when I went to Vegas, I did what I knew. I had a business in Boston doing the same thing. I started at 20 years old, and then it grew into something quite big. In fact, when I was in Boston, Herb Chambers was one of my customers. And I became friends with Herb and the BMW club called Rondell, and the guy that started Rondell. And I was the go-to guy for concourse detailing. And then I had to recreate that reputation out on the other side of the country. No friends, no family. But I was hungry and I was young, And so I went to all these car dealerships. I started meeting casino owners. It was a great time in my life because I was only in my 20s. And I loved cars. And I had a dream and I went after it. But that being said, some of the casino owners, I have some really good stories and some really weird stories. I think one of the most interesting stories when I moved to Vegas was I started doing work for car dealerships. At the time, it was called Chasin Motors. I don't know if you remember Chasin Motor Cars. They were around a long time in Vegas. They were the premier Rolls-Royce, BMW. And I also did work for the Tobin family. I did work for Dan when he was alive. Jessica and her mom, Caroline, they run Tobin now. So I started doing a lot of work for the dealerships. But I remember one time I had a shop. It was in Chinatown off of Spring Mountain Jones. It was in a shopping center, a very weird location. I got special use permits to put these canopies up, and I was behind a Walgreens. But then again, I knew what I wanted to do, so I said the only way I'm going to start this detailing business was to go and work with these car dealerships. And that would feed me their clients. And I worked relationships with the sales department, the service department, the body shop. And they started introducing me to other customers, and I would help them out when they would get a black car and say, "Hey, we got some issues." And I would bail them out of a situation, but in return, they would pay the favor back and give me a retail client. And I went from just being one guy, and if you watch my video on YouTube, I talk about what is Glossit and who's Rich Light. I actually show the story of this little shopping center where I'm washing cars for like $7. Now, literally, we didn't have ad spend like that, right? Facebook advertising, Google. What do we have? Just straight hustle. And that was a way as a lost leader to bring people in to upsell them on other services. And it became very successful very quicker than I knew. But one of the stories that was really interesting is when one day I got a really weird phone call, and the Rolls-Royce dealership, who at the time was Chasin, said to me, these guys are looking to have these semis buffed out for big Peterbilt semis. And I said, well, just tell them to call me. So call me on the phone. He says, hey, listen, we've got this issue. This is when the Bellagio Hotel just opened. And they said, can you come down to the Bellagio and take a look at these vehicles? We really need help. I said, sure. So I went down to the Bellagio, went into one of the ballrooms. I don't know how they got these semis in there because there were 4 of them up on a stage, and semis are quite big. But they did. They figured out, they flattened the tires, they rolled them in, and they got them up on the stage. And I said, what can I do for you? And they said, we need them to be buffed out and polished because we got a lot of scratches. And I said, they look pretty good to me. And they flipped the lights on and, light show. And I was like, holy cow, what happened to these trucks? And they're like, well, we had this mobile wash guy in Vegas wash them, and he had some dirty brushes. And the paint that we put on these new semis is a base coat clear coat. It's not Emron. And they used to put these really thick paint, if you know, on commercial equipment. So I looked at them, and it was a new model. And it wasn't like the old box traditional Peterbilt trucks. It was contemporary. It was modern. It was like a car paint. And I looked at the guy, and I said, what do you want me to do? And he's like, I want you to fix it. And again, at the time, this guy was an executive for Peterbilt trucks. And I said, okay, we got a couple issues. One is I need to know the timeline. And number two, cost. And he said, well, you have till tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning when the show starts. And I was like, you're kidding. He's like, no, I'm serious. I'm like, wow. And I said, cost. And he says, give me a number. And I said, okay, 25,000. And because I really knew this was not going to be a possible feat. I was like, no, I don't think we're going to get it done. I mean, it's 4:30 in the afternoon and I got to have these trucks by 8:30 in the morning. This is crazy. There was 4 of them. At this time was the development of Glossit, which is our brand today. I was working on a compound that could, in 1 or 2 steps, remove really severe damage as far as scratches and swirl marks. And I was excited because I really believed I could work on these vehicles and get them done. But, you know, in 8 hours, that's a little crazy. So the guy looks at me, smirks and laughs. And I said, what's so funny? He said, when can you start? And I said, well, I'm going to have to go back to my operation, get some of my crew, call some people I know. And by 6:30 that night, we were all down there. There was about 9 of us working on these trucks. And by 4:30 in the morning, they looked like glass. And I told everybody to go home. I got back in one of the trucks. They had the bed inside, and I slept in the truck. It's 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm getting a bang on the truck. It's one of the executives. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm tired. He said, the trucks look amazing. How did you do this? And I said, well, I'm building my own product, or I'm in the process, and Glossit didn't exist, but I had all these great ideas. And he said, well, we owe you $25,000. And I said, yes, you do. And he said, well, we're going to go to the casino. We're going to get the money, and we'll bring it back in a duffel bag. And I felt like I was in the mafia, right? They want to give me a duffel bag. They want to give money. I'm in a casino. I thought, what are they going to do, whack me now? They came back and they had the duffel bag and it had $25,000 in cash. I said, you know, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. And they said, but you can't leave yet. And I said, why? And they said, well, the president of Peterbilt wants to meet you. And I said, okay. So the president comes to me and says, I just want to tell you, I don't know how you did this or the crew and the technology you used to do this, but we got a real problem at our factory in Denton, Texas. And I'd like to hire you and have you come there. And I said, and do what? I want you to train my crew in my factory on how to do what you did here. And I said, sure. But I didn't know what to charge. I didn't know what kind of price I could get. I called my dad and I said, Dad, this is really crazy. And I told him the story. And he said, you now know the difference between people who get paid for what they know versus people who get paid for what they do. And you are now getting paid for what you know. And that brings a lot more money. I called the president the next week. He wanted me down that week. They bought me a first class plane ticket. They picked me up in a limo. They put me up in a suite. And I spent a whole week working in the factory, which was very cool to see how they build these trucks. And I worked in the body shop. And it was not a normal body shop by any means. It was amazing. And they paid me hundreds of dollars an hour to be a consultant. And this relationship went on for 3 years. It evolved into me traveling with them as a consultant where I didn't touch the vehicles, but I was in charge of supervising the vehicles, and I flew around the world as a consultant for Peterbilt.